My admiration of the work that Kenya is doing on all the security work in the area. We're a partner because of our Defence Cooperation Agreement, and it means that we can work together on some of the difficult issues facing the area, such as the terrible violence in Somalia, which hopefully can see a resolution now that the elections are through. We've got a lot of work to do as an international group of countries there, but also a difficult position in South Sudan. So Kenya has made a great name for itself as a voice for the region, and it's great to be here.
Okay, so reading up on the work you're doing as the Prime Minister's Special Representative on preventing sexual violence, when you hear of what is happening in South Sudan, I know the UN peacekeeping mission falls under your docket. Do you find or do you feel that the response has been adequate?
I think that the United Nations has not only a duty to protect, but we as individual countries have a duty to make it possible for the peacekeepers to do that. So, of course, one can blame, say, a soldier who's in command. It's not necessarily that particular soldier who is at fault. We've got to make sure that the troops are trained in a way that they know how to deal with sexual and gender-based violence. They know how to respond to that, and they know how to protect civilians. And that's the work I've been seeing today here in Kenya. I've been seeing the work here at the British Peace Support Team work, where people come to be trained about how do we, whether we are soldiers, whether we are police, whether we are civil servants, whether we're in civil society, how do we help people who have suffered sexual violence and conflict? Because it's only if we help people like that to know that they are full members of society and not be stigmatised, not be ostracised, that we can then have society that heals itself. Otherwise, after conflict, if victims are treated as though they are at fault somehow and stigmatised, the society can't come together and the peace doesn't last long. And the one thing I know, that all the countries represented here today, which includes Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, all the countries I'm visiting this week, they all want to have not only a military peace, but a long-term political peace too.
Okay, I read something about a principles of is it guidelines?
Indeed, yes.
Yes, that you want to present during the UN, is it the General Assembly?
Indeed, and we call it a protocol for documenting evidence. It is literally a guide in so many different languages. Now I think it's about 12 languages, and it assists people who are meeting survivors of sexual violence. It helps them to get the evidence collected in a way that doesn't make the victim have to tell the story again and again and suffer all that terrible violence over again. Collect the evidence in a way that it can then be securely stored and can be used in court when it's possible to have a judicial process. So whether you are somebody who's very experienced in collecting evidence or you've never done it before, you can follow this guidance and you know you're helping the victim to store away stories, real evidence, real events, which means that those who are guilty can be brought to account. Even if it's years later, they won't get away with it. The perpetrators will be held to account.
Okay, how far along are you in the process?
We started doing this, or at least drafted the work on this, way back in 2014. And it has been very successful. We've gradually increased the number of languages, but what we were told over the last year when I was working on this was that for some organisations who are really quite small, they felt that it was too complicated, and therefore please could we update it? Because after all, the world moves on. We've got Twitter, we've got a lot more social media than we ever used to have. Please update it so that it's more current for the modern world and also just a bit more user-friendly. That's what we've done. The new version is going to be launched, and that is also translated into a variety of languages, and that means that we can not only ensure that some of the more internationally organised NGOs can access it, but even small charities, small organisations, they can play their part too, because it'll be usable for them.
Okay, I'll take you to the UN peacekeeping missions. There's concern that there may be budget cuts. I know the U.S. Special Envoy to the UN has been pushing for budget cuts, and some of the missions that she identified during her Senate hearing was the mission in South Sudan and the mission in Darfur. Is that of concern to you?
I've read the newspaper stories that the United States may be looking at how they cut some of their budget to the United Nations. We don't know the detail of that yet. I've only seen what's been in the press, and I know that the Trump administration is looking very carefully at value for money. Well, don't we all? I'm sure Kenya looks for value for money as well, because what you want to do is to know that when you're training your troops, when you're actually committing them to taking part in protecting civilians and keeping civilians safe but the troops safe, you want to do it in a way that is going to be effective. We look for having really good value for money too. So cutting a budget isn't necessarily going to be damaging, it's how you do it. And for me, the most critical matter is to ensure that those who wear the blue helmets, the peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers, are maintained in a way that gives them the security they need to do their job well. That's value for money to me.
Okay. Brexit, of course, was a hot button topic last year.
And
still is. The EU, right, was one of the major funders of the mission in Somalia. Should the process conclude and the British government, the British people leave the European Union Commission, how will that impact?
Well, there are three different things there, really. First of all, with regard to the cuts made by the EU, we fought against that. We didn't agree with it, but it went through despite our opposition. Secondly, there's the whole issue about when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. We, by the end of March, will start the process by which we negotiate that leaving process. So we will launch what's called Article 50, the Prime Minister will launch that, and there's legislation going through both the House of Commons, House of Lords at the moment that puts it on a parliamentary basis, but that will start. During that process, we will then look at all our support worldwide for not only the UN, but other organisations as well. And I'm impressed here at the way, of course, that we're able to have projects that we support within Kenya. But for us, working in places like Somalia and South Sudan is absolutely crucial to what we in the UK see as value in doing international work, because those two countries really are ones where we feel we have, in Somalia, long history, and in South Sudan we have a real consciousness of how delicate the situation is there, and we value the security of the whole of this region. So leaving the European Union as an organisation won't change our view. This area matters. Its security matters. It may be a few thousand kilometres from the UK, but we know how important it is to keep security here. And therefore Somalia and South Sudan, we should be maintaining our commitment there to send our troops there, our technicians there, to help keep the peace. First of all, we've got to keep making sure there is a peace in Somalia to keep.
Okay. I heard that you met with the Minister of Defence.
Yes, indeed.
This morning. So there was an assurance of mutual cooperation on both sides,
indeed.
As I take it.
Indeed, and I was very pleased that we were able to sign and complete the agreement to have the Defence Cooperation Agreement here. That's kind of a public signal to how closely we're able to work in Kenya. And we also work on mutual legal assistance, on security matters. So we have a very good relationship with the government of Kenya, because we certainly admire the work they do in trying to maintain security across the whole region, not doing what is just best for Kenya, but doing what is best for the whole region as well.
Okay, so British soldiers will continue to train
in
Kenya?
Indeed, yes indeed. We very much value the work we do here.
Okay, and the agreement you said you signed was for a period of?
The period, I didn't sign the agreement.
Oh, sorry.
I don't want to claim credit for something I didn't achieve, but soon after our High Commissioner came here, that agreement was signed, and that can be reviewed in the future.
All right, okay, fantastic. I know the ICC falls under your docket, and in the just recently concluded Africa Union Commission Summit, the question of ICC came up, and a non-binding resolution on a mass exit was passed, non-binding though, and there was also a resolution on reform of the ICC. Do you support?
Well, I've been discussing this with colleagues here across the Kenyan government today, and I was very much aware after the African Union summit that some of that had been misreported, because what Kenya was doing was not saying that everybody must leave. It was saying that everybody must look very carefully at how the ICC works. Is it really functioning in the way that we all expected? Now, for me, that's not counterproductive. I think Kenya's only doing what any government would do, and that is to say, when we signed the Treaty of Rome, are we now getting what we thought we'd signed up to? And therefore, the resolution itself, I know, called for future research to take place. There were many ministers there from other countries who were saying very firmly, like Nigeria and others, saying very firmly, we are great supporters of the ICC. The UK is a great supporter of the ICC. We're under one of the prosecutor's investigations, but we're very much a supporter of the ICC, and we want to cooperate with them, because what we were able to do with Kenya's help when the ICC was formed was to show that countries around the world really can come together to find a way of having a court that is only going to be dealing with cases as a last resort when everything else has failed. And it's shown to me the way that internationalism can work. And what I wouldn't like to see is that fall apart. And I'm very happy to work with Kenya to look at how we can change the processes if need be, but how we can ensure the ICC actually does the work well. Because clearly over the last year, it's improved its processes. Let's reflect on that and see if there's anything else that needs to be changed. But I'm in listening mode.
Okay.
I'm here to listen.
Okay, so you're happy to have the dialogue, the conversation?
Very happy to have the dialogue,
Okay,
yes.
Finally, the climate change is also something of course.
Indeed,
you cover quite a bit.
I'm very lucky. I have a challenging and wide portfolio. It's good stuff.
Yes, some of the pronouncements from the now elected now in office US President Donald Trump, do they concern you?
I hope that when he looks very closely at the briefing he will receive about climate change, that he'll realise that by working together, whether it was at the Paris summit, whether it was more recently in Marrakesh last year, that we really do have a duty to be able to provide ways in which small island developing states can have a hope that they won't be inundated by increasing weather events in the future, that they won't lose their economies, but also that we look carefully at countries like Kenya, where the desertification is increasing, where we see the impact of climate change, and where herdsmen find that they want to move further south. Northern Nigeria, where the Hausa there, for centuries, they've driven their cattle in areas that now they can't. They're moving down. It causes instability, and therefore I hope he will see that climate change is so real because security is real and it matters, and it's threatened by climate change.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much
much indeed.